Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the GD Report. I am D.
You sure about that?
Hey, that joke was funny the first 7 times I
I
heard
know,
you.
but when you said it, you were like, let me think.
I always hesitate on that, just to make you think and to make
Right.
you think, because if I hesitate on that, you're going to think, wait, who am I?
No, I know I'm G. I'm
I don't
always
know.
G.
I don't know if you're
I'm G, you're D. Let's get rolling.
All right. So everybody, hope everybody's doing well. Busy week of lots of stuff happening. And, I think everybody, falsely thought when we got a little bit of a return to normalcy with an actual president who adhered to some of the norms of the office with President Biden, that things might slow down and get back to some kind of sense of normalcy, but they haven't. It
Nope.
just continues on. And because we have one functioning party that is pro-democracy, and we have another party that is a sycophantic party dedicated to autocracy and to a specific person.
Yep.
And so that's where we are today. We've got the January 6th hearings, select committee hearings still going on. And so we've got some updates from that. So G-Man, why don't you give us kind of an update on what's happening with that?
Well, one thing I'd like to say is that it kind of appalls me that one of our nation's major networks, Fox, isn't even really airing the thing. And they do their level best every night to disparage it.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy.
Well, and I'll just parlay off that a little bit, because one of the talking points that they continue to talk about on Fox and on some of the other lesser right-wing networks, One American News, Newsmax, those kinds of things, and I hear it on some of the talking points from some of the Republican senators and Republican members of Congress, is they're criticizing the committee, and they're saying that there's not enough bipartisan cross-examination, that there should have been more Republicans on the committee to be able to cross-examine it. And you just go, can you be any more blatantly hypocritical from the standpoint that they actually had the opportunity? Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer were both in agreement that this would be a bipartisan commission consisting of unelected people. So it would be like the 9/11 commission, where you had equal representations of Democrat and Republican members, and they would each have subpoena powers. I believe they would have, that original bipartisan commission had a December 31st, 2021 deadline too, to complete their investigation. And so it would have been over by now. Right. But what happened? No, Republicans in Congress blocked it, wanted nothing to do with it. And then when Nancy Pelosi decided to do a House Select Committee on it, you had and still offered to have Republican representation on the committee. Who did McCarthy nominate? People who participated in the coup.
Yeah.
So Pelosi rightfully said no, and there is bipartisanship on the committee. You got 2 outstanding Republicans that with Liz Cheney, the vice chair, and then Adam Kinzinger from Illinois. And it is one of the most bipartisan things that I've seen in a while. Very in depth, very thorough. The presentations have been awesome. The witnesses, and to me, it's refreshing for once, and it's the first time in a long time that we've had a committee hearing where it's not, full of cross examination that's asinine with,
right.
Asking, did you support Hillary Clinton for president? Things that had nothing to do with the topic. And that's what it would have been if those types of Republicans have been on there, because we don't have people like Howard Baker or like Nancy Kassebaum or Republicans like Barry Goldwater even. It's funny these days when you think about Barry Goldwater as a moderate compared to today's Republican Party.
Right. Didn't Kevin McCarthy want to put on the committee a guy who we now know tried to hand Mike Pence a new set of electors?
Well, that was Ron John.
wasn't he one of the ones that's supposed to be on the committee?
No, it's a House committee, and Ron
Oh,
Johnson.
House. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, but yeah, Senator Johnson has been found out now that one of his staffers was texting a staffer for the Vice President Pence saying, Senator Johnson would like to hand something to the Vice President, and the chief of staff for Pence said, "What is it?" And he said, he didn't even like say, "Oh, never mind. It's just something he needs to see." I thought he might try to cover it up because,
right.
it's a list of alternate electors from Michigan and Wisconsin. And right. the guy's like, "Do not hand him that."
Right.
And then Johnson's trying to deny it, saying, "Oh, it was a staff to staff communication. He had no idea." Come on, dude.
Right.
These folks, I will tell you one thing that's interesting about this, and this kind of segues into our overall topic that I want to hear your opinion on in a second. But I get the sense, and you tell me if you feel the same way or if you think I'm wrong on this, but I get the sense that Republicans are starting to feel the heat on this.
Yeah, I do too.
The viewership has been through the roof. I think 20 million people watched the first night. You're starting to see that there could be potential legal ramifications, and rightfully so, for the actors in this. And you're starting to see, like Ron John, saying, "Oh, this is a non-story, and I never handed anything to the Vice President, so it doesn't matter," and on and on and on. And it's like, I don't think they understand sometimes the things that they were playing with on January 6th. The fact that what conspiracy means. Conspiracy to commit a crime does not mean that you committed the crime. It means you conspired to help the crime occur.
Yeah. Well, Eastman, there was an editorial here in one of the papers so Eastman has ties to Colorado University. And so one of the papers here was saying he needs to, based on the early testimony, and I don't think they've really gotten in depth into what all he did and his emails and all that. But, this said, based on the early testimony, he needs to get a good lawyer because he's looking at some pretty significant jail time. And I think that, the committee came out and said they feel they've got enough to indict former President Trump. And I believe they do. And I believe that they'll hand that to the Justice Department, or the Justice Department will see what they've got when it's all said and done. And whether Merrick Garland has the temerity to do what's right, we'll see.
Well, I feel like that we've talked about this multiple times for the last almost 6 years. But if one person is above the law, then that means there is no law.
Yep.
And so you can't have, even that Justice Department edict that they had during the Mueller investigation, where they said, a sitting president can't be indicted. I think they've got to really look hard at that, because, and I know that there's a chance that could become a political hot button, because you get the wrong people in power, the wrong people with the wrong motives. But you'd like to think that the justice system would work that kind of stuff out. Look what happened when the former president, twice impeached president, by the way, I'll keep mentioning, when he sued, 80 times or whatever in all different courts in all different states at all different levels, and every case got thrown out.
Yeah, and a lot of those states were ones that voted for him.
Yeah, and judges that were appointed by him.
Yeah.
Cases. So you like to think that there's still some kind of safeguards against those kinds of things, but there's a real likelihood that we're going to see indictments. Now, one thing that we didn't get to on the pregame tailgate was one of the articles I read a couple days ago was talking about that there's rumblings inside Camp Trump that Trump may try his hardest to completely turn on Eastman and blame everything on Eastman. This, the former president had nothing to do with it. It was all Eastman's idea. But a great analogy I heard for this today from Ari Berman was that, or Ari Melber, was that you can't throw a surprise party for yourself.
Right.
And that's the thing Trump's going to be up against on this is, is that there's too many witnesses that have already testified,
Right.
and they know that that he was involved in this. He stoked it. He knew he didn't win, but he was looking for a way to stay in power.
Yep. Well, one of the things, most historians will tell you that the defining moment of Watergate came when was it what was the senator from Tennessee's name? Thompson?
Howard Baker.
No, not Harold Baker. Thompson. Was it John Thompson?
You're talking about Fred Thompson, but he wasn't
Fred Thompson. Yeah,
he wasn't senator then.
Right, but he was. Yeah, that what I was trying to think of his name. So he was a member of the committee legal team, and he asked Alexander Butterfield, a name that is known only to hardcore Watergate, historians, if there were any listening devices in the White House, and he said, "Oh yeah, there were," and the whole thing turned on a dime. And now, Nixon was up against the wall. There was a record of what he said and when he said it. And a similar thing has happened, and it hasn't really gotten much traction, which to me is really kind of interesting. But I've asked a lot of people, some that I know follow politics pretty close, hey, what'd you think of that story? And they're like, oh, they haven't seen it. The story I'm talking about is Politico, which is doing a great job. They broke this story that said before, during, and after January 6th, there was a documentary film crew that had unfettered access to the White House, and now they are cooperating with the committee. And I think you had a good point on the pregame tailgate. So tell us about this.
You're gonna have to tell me which point it was. I made so many good points on the pregame tailgate.
Well, about the documentary.
Oh, I mean, it's following them day in, day out, and it's going to have records of what they thought, what they said, what they did, and it'll continue, as you said. It's going to be the smoking gun of this whole thing. Right. It's going to be I think and that may be, in fact, what happened with the committee hearings, because there was supposed to be more hearings next week. There's going to be a hearing tomorrow on Thursday where they're going to talk about the plan to install Jeff Clark as the acting attorney general. But they're postponing next week's hearings into July, which everything was supposed to end in June. So the interesting fact to me about that is they're combing through that documentary right now.
Right.
And so they've got all that raw footage. They've got it all available to them to be able to look for contradictions in testimony, to look for ways that the family. I was talking about this earlier with my wife, and the White House staff didn't even know that reports say that this was even going on, how long it was going on. And so this could be another grift from the Trump campaign, that they were looking to sell this documentary, keeping up with the Kardashian style. So it's this whole thing just keeps getting peeled back like a rotten onion. Yep. Each level keeps getting peeled back. And every time there's an investigation like this, every time there's a scandal, it's always people saying there's no there. There's nothing to this. It's just a witch hunt. Why are the Democrats doing this? And the more we learn, the more we realize how close we got to seeing our democracy overthrown. And I'm not speaking in hyperbole there. If we have a duly and a free, fair election and the results are thrown out and the will of the voters is thrown out, we don't have a democracy at that point. Because then we have government autocrats determining whose vote counts and whose vote doesn't.
Right. And, Trump wants to get back in there. And if he does, and if the Republicans get control, he could be president for the rest of his life, like Putin. I mean, it's not a far stretch to say we're going to change the Constitution, because there's a constitutional amendment that limits the presidential term to 2 terms. We're going to change that to be unlimited, and Trump can be president for life.
Or what if we just declare unending martial law?
Yeah. I mean, all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, people that think it couldn't happen, it's just, think again. It's happened in other countries, and it can sure happen here. So,
well, where did CPAC have their last convention?
I don't know.
Hungary.
Oh, Hungary, right? Yep.
Viktor Orban. He's done the exact same thing. He came to power being democratically elected, and he systematically removed all the safeguards to keep him from staying in power.
Right.
And did things about like who's counting the votes, and that's one of the things I think Democrats, and I think they're awake, but we'll find out this November, is not just, I mean, we have a tendency sometimes to focus on just the White House, but there's some really important attorney general and governor races and secretary of state races in some of these states that if they go the wrong way, you got people that are denying, that are saying they would have overturned the will of the people. Look at Texas. Texas just had their Republican convention, and they voted that Joe Biden should not be president. They don't recognize the results of the 2020 election.
What a bunch of idiots. Just goes to show that Texas isn't a state that anybody wants to live in. So,
no. All right. Well, we will keep tabs on that, and we'll see at how things develop. One thing I will mention that I know I picked up on, and I haven't heard a lot of coverage on it, but in her closing statement on Tuesday, Liz Cheney said she appealed to Pat Cipollone to come testify in person in front of the committee, and the former White House counsel.
Yep.
And what I found interesting was early on in the hearings, they played tapes of Jared Kushner making fun of him and saying that when Cipollone and the White House counsel's office said that if Trump did some of the things he was talking about doing, that he would resign. They asked Jared what he thought of that, and he said he felt like it was just whining.
Right. Yeah, I saw that.
And so Cipollone might be at a point where he goes, you know what, I'm tired of putting up with this.
Right. Well, you got to ask yourself, at what point does your loyalty move away from the guy and go back to the country, which is where it should have been all along?
And that's a good point, because one thing I do want to mention is that I think we have to be really careful that we don't turn some of this into hero worship, where we're putting these folks up on pedestals for doing their jobs and doing the right thing. It's like people like Mike Pence, what a patriot. He really stood up. Did he really stand up?
Right.
I mean,
no,
he did what was legally allowed. And I guarantee you that as much as he kissed up to and followed Trump for 6 years and was his lapdog, if he could have found a way that he felt like was justified to be able to overturn that, he would have done it.
Yeah.
Just Google Mike Pence and water bottles sometime, and you'll see the video of him at a cabinet meeting with Trump, where Trump takes a drink of water, puts the water bottle down, then moves the water bottle to the floor, and Pence takes a drink of his and puts it on the floor. I mean, it's eerie how he just was such a lapdog for Trump.
Right. Well, most people don't realize that he had his own legal staff research, what Trump was telling him to see if he could do it. He knew, and any sane person would know, that what they were trying to do was illegal. And yet, he didn't trust his own judgment. He wanted to have his legal team back it up. So,
yeah. And then the last thing I'll say is, besides putting these people up on a pedestal, they had the Speaker of the Arizona House testify yesterday, and he talked about some of the challenges he went through and how his faith wouldn't allow him to do these things that were illegal. Even though he's a Republican, he supported the Republican nominee, and how they had protested outside of his house. They had a flashing signboard that called him a pedophile and called him a pervert. And all the while, they had an adult daughter who was dying in their house, I believe, of cancer. And she had to witness all that. And he went through this whole thing about how he stood up for his beliefs and, on and on. And I really walked away from yesterday going, I admire the guy. I don't agree with his politics, but I admire him because he stood up. And then today in an interview, he said, that if Trump's the 2024 nominee, he'll vote for him. And so
Yeah, that's crazy.
you just go, what kind of mind control is there in the Republican Party these days?
Right.
Because you just have to go, if and you and I've talked about this with Ted Cancun Cruz before. If someone had insulted my father the way he insulted Ted Cruz's father, and my wife the way he insulted Ted Cruz's wife, I would be the first one to say, hell no, I won't vote for him. Hell no, I won't support him. And if anybody's got a problem with that, then don't vote for me.
Yeah,
but they're so scared of the MAGA crowd, and it's Frankenstein's monster. They created the monster. Now they got to deal with him killing people in the village.
Yeah. Speaking of killing people, that's a good segue. It looks like we have the makings of a new gun law, the first in decades, but we'll see if that passes.
Yeah, we've got a bipartisan bill that it passed the first hurdle last night, a procedural vote to get it on the schedule. Got 64 votes, 14 Republicans joined all 50 Democrats, which is an amazing thing in and of itself.
Right.
50 Democrats to vote for anything. But it's a negotiated package. It will be the most sweeping set of gun laws in 30 years that have passed, gun safety reform. But that being said, no gun safety laws have been passed in 30 years. So, it's been since we had the assault weapons ban in around 1994, 1993, that was passed at the last time we had anything that was fairly comprehensive. And it's got some good pieces in it. And there are definitely some things that are a good start, but in my opinion, it doesn't go nearly far enough to be able to address the challenges that we're facing today with these types of shootings. I mean, it closes the boyfriend loophole where people who are in a relationship but not married, they can be banned from purchasing a gun for assaults moving forward, not assaults in the past, as you pointed out in the pregame tailgate. It's got funding for mental health. It's got funding for states that choose to pass their own red flag laws. But you take a state like a Texas or Oklahoma, where I live. They're not going to pass a red flag law. Doesn't matter how much funding you put on the table. I mean, for the longest time, Oklahoma refused Medicaid dollars for Obamacare. Even though the money was right there, we refused it for Medicaid expansion. Even though the money was there and it would have helped millions of people in our state, refused it because of the politics.
Yep. Well, and even if you have states like Texas that go ahead and pass it, you'll have sheriffs like we had one up here that'll say, I'm not enforcing that law. We had a sheriff up here that was adamant about it. And our attorney general had his credentials revoked and he couldn't be sheriff anymore. And so, the state basically said, you're going to enforce our laws or you're not going to be the guy enforcing the laws anymore.
Right. You don't get to pick and choose. Yeah. You don't get to pick and
Yeah.
So, I mean, like I said, I'm in favor of anything that will help. And it's a step in the right direction, but not nearly far enough. There's definitely going to be political implications because Republicans are going to be crowing that they were able to come together and get this bipartisan legislation passed, and some of them will be hiding behind it. However, most of the people voting for it are not people up for election this time.
Right.
So they're going to be able to rail against it. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays in the suburbs. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays in the suburbs. And to me, there's a voting block that needs to rear its head, and that is those turning 18 and the parents of those turning 18. They need to stand together. They need to put politics aside. They need to say, I'm voting for the guy who's going to get this legislation passed, who's going to protect our schools, because I've got other kids and my kids have friends that are still in school that face this every single day. And it's crazy. It's a problem that can be fixed. So fix it.
Yeah. And it's like, we've talked about on the pregame tailgate, we talked about just, some people make the automobile analogy and they say, well, there's auto accidents, there's drunk driving accidents. You don't outlaw cars. No, you don't outlaw cars, but you also say who gets to drive cars and who doesn't get to drive cars based on their records. You also say you have to have insurance on your car. Your car has to be registered. You also say there's things where you go, just because something exists doesn't mean I can drive. I can't go and buy one of Jeff Gordon's stock cars and that can go 200 miles an hour and just go put it on the street and drive it. You got to have cars got to be deemed street legal. There's all kinds of regulations when it comes to cars. And so when people make that analogy between cars and guns, I just go, what are you thinking? Because to me, you just argued against yourself. And I think that, again, Republicans have done a great job for 50 years on messaging on this issue because of the term gun control. And it's like that gets in people's heads. And I know a lot of people that own guns and that are just adamant. They're not going to take my guns. They're not going to take my, and it's like right now, nobody's talking about taking guns. Oh, it's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope to increase background checks. Well, if you're a law-abiding citizen and you own a gun and you don't have a criminal record, what do you care about background checks?
Yep. Well, like I was telling you, here in Colorado, if you want to ride a motorcycle on the street, you can't just, even though you have a valid driver's license, you can't just go, buy a motorcycle and step out on the street and drive it. First of all, the dealers won't sell it to you unless you have a motorcycle license. And in order to get a motorcycle license, you have to go to 3-day school. It's conducted by the Department of Public Safety. So basically the highway patrol. They provide the motorcycles. You can't bring your own. And they basically teach you everything from how to get on it, how to start it, to, how to pull up to a stop sign, what the laws are that you have to obey, the helmet laws. I mean, everything. And you have to do that to be able to ride a motorcycle, to just ride down to 7-Eleven and get a Coke.
Yep.
Why can't we have the same type of thing for guns? And if we don't, why can't I buy a tank? And why can't I shoot it?
Why can't you buy a rocket launcher?
Exactly. I want a rocket launcher. That's a firearm.
Yeah. Why is the government impeding your right to buy that? Why can't you have a fully automatic weapon?
Absolutely. Yeah. Why can't I have a fully automatic weapon? I mean,
can't you have a Tommy gun? It goes on and on. It's just an asinine argument by the gun manufacturers that stokes people up. And if you're a law-abiding citizen, you got no trouble with it. There are things every day where you go, I would like to drive 100 miles an hour to my office, but the speed limit in different places is 25, 35, 45, 55, 65.
Yep.
Whatever it is, that's the law. I don't get to say, hey, choose my own adventure day. I'm going to drive as fast as I want. You want to operate a vehicle, and if you get enough speeding tickets, they're going to take your license away. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully that gets passed. I still feel like Charlie Brown and Lucy with the football when it comes to this.
Yeah, well, and as we talked about, the House is already, House Republicans are already, making a lot of noise about they're not going to support it. So
thankfully they don't have a filibuster in the House.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So last topic I think is on gun safety as well. It's just kind of a recap of what's going on down in Texas and Uvalde. And it just talk about peeling an onion back on a story. It keeps getting. You can understand why Governor Abbott wanted to have a quick press conference and say, he was slapping the law enforcement on the back and saying what a great job they did. And if they hadn't been there when they were, more children would have been killed, and on and on and on. And then he wanted everything to stop right there. Everybody just accept the story as it is. We don't need additional investigations. And they've even, the district attorney down there has tried to get people to stop cooperating with journalists and other investigations. But the state Senate has, during their special session, has a committee right now investigating it. and it is just every day something more abhorrent comes out.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us, you sent me a link to a story today, which I thought was very heartbreaking. And then you also told me something in the pregame tailgate. I want you to bring that up as well.
Well, I'm going to do my best to remember it, man. You're putting a lot of pressure on me tonight to remember what I talk about in the pregame
Right.
tailgate. But you know, one of the most heartbreaking, and this story is full of heartbreaking stories. I mean, the whole story is, you think about different cases, just the little girl that covered her body with blood to try to hide her friend's blood, to try to hide that she was dead and play dead. You've got, you know, the kids calling 911. You've got the officers not going in the room for over an hour. But today it was released that one of the teachers who was killed, her husband, is a police officer, I believe maybe either city or a school police officer. And she called him from the room and said, "I've been shot and I'm dying." And he said, "I'll come and get you." And he went into the school with his gun, and he was restrained by the other officers. They took his weapon away from him and would not allow him in the building. And so he was willing to go in. He was willing to go in and fight for his wife and fight for those kids. And he was held back. And, you know, it seems on each case of this, we've got people pointing the fingers at, you know, the local people are saying, well, it was the state's fault. The state people are saying it's the locals' fault. It is one of the most abject failures in law enforcement that I've ever seen.
Right. And then in the pregame, you were telling me about an investigation that.
Oh yeah, the district attorney. Is that what you're talking about? The district attorney? Yeah, she basically had said that she was going to investigate this, and that they didn't think that the final findings would come out till November, conveniently after the election. But she had to admit today that there's no ongoing investigation right now, because under Texas law, and it may be in a lot of states, once the main perpetrator of the crime, which would be the shooter, once he is deceased, there no longer has to be an investigation, because it's the crime's technically over at that point. However, I would make the case that there's some other crimes that were committed in that building by those police officers: negligence, dereliction of duty. I mean, I could go on and on, and in child endangerment even. And so I think there's plenty of things to be investigating. And if Abbott doesn't appoint a special state prosecutor, I think the FBI's got to come in and take this over. DOJ's got to come in and say, we're going to take over this investigation and we're going to get to the bottom of what happened, because it's too much. There's too many missing pieces to this.
Well, excuse me. I know Garland sent a 7-member commission to Texas to review what was going on and report back to him. But I think he needs to go ahead and appoint a special prosecutor, you know, have the FBI go down and do their own investigation. I mean, otherwise it's just a good old boy network and they're all just covering for their, you know, for their buddies. So.
Yeah. And trying to make it last past the election in November.
Yeah.
So we shall see.
All righty. That's all I got.
Yep. And well, everybody stay safe out there. And, you know, last thing I will throw a couple things in here at the end, just a couple tidbits. We did have the Alabama runoff yesterday, and Mo Brooks, congressman, was defeated in the U.S. Senate race. Katie Britt is going to be the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate in Alabama. And Brooks, of course, was the famous one that from January 6th said at the rally, while he was wearing a bulletproof vest under his clothes, by the way, it's time to start taking names and kicking ass.
Right.
And, Trump endorsed him. Then Trump rescinded his endorsement and endorsed Katie Britt. And now Mo Brooks has been defeated in that. And then Trump lost. There was like 3 other congressional runoffs in Georgia, and all the candidates he endorsed, every one of them lost.
Oh, wow.
So it just, you know, and I will say that the other candidates who they ran on Trump-like agendas. They said, even though he didn't endorse me, you know, I support him. one guy even said the 2020 election was full of fraud, not proven, not true. But we'll see how everything shakes out. But it's interesting. They're still loyal to this guy who continues to be a loser.
Yeah. And would throw them under the bus in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Just ask John Eastman in about 2 weeks.
Yeah. Right.
All right, everybody take care. We'll talk to you real soon. Have a great night.
Good night, everybody.